Well, good morning, everyone. Today is Monday, September 22nd, 2025. We're here this morning for a work session regarding performance measures for support services. And I'm Kristen Stevens, Chair of the Board of County Commissioners. With me are my fellow commissioners, Commissioner Jody Shattuck McNally and Commissioner John Kafalis. We have our county manager with us, Lorenda Volker, and we have a whole room full of important people that we're delighted to hear from this morning. But I will turn things over to Julie Elser, our data program manager, who will kick us off this morning. And then I'll just ask folks to introduce themselves as they speak.
Thanks. I'm Julie Elser, Data Program Manager. Today is the last in our series of performance measures work sessions. Today we're hearing from the support services service area. We have 6 departments presenting today. We have one time constraint. Our county attorney and our finance director have another commitment at 10:30. So we're going to try to get those two out of here by 10:25 so that they can head to that other commitment. And then after that, we'll plan for about 15 minutes per department. And to get rolling, we'll go ahead and get started with the county attorney.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Bill Rasu, Larimer County Attorney. I'll be pretty quick today. So our measures are our carryovers from our prior years, and really our measures focus on efficiency for our office. The first measure is looking at the chart on the left, and it looks at the number of attorneys that we have per capita compared to similarly populated counties, which are Weld County, Arapahoe County, and Boulder County. Weld and Boulder are very close in population to Larimer County. Arapahoe County is about 50% bigger than us. We include that to give you just a sense of what a top 3 population county looks like in comparison to us. So for this first measure, you'll see it's staying relatively stable from last year. We have in Larimer one attorney for approximately every 41,500 people in our community. Weld, in comparison, has one attorney for about every 37,000 people. Boulder, one attorney for every 14,000 people. And Arapahoe is one attorney for about every 27,000 people. You'll see on the chart back in 2022, the ratio did change. We added an attorney that year, and so that's what you'll see that dip there. But since then, Larimer County, along with our peer counties, have stayed stable over the last year. As part of this, we also included non-attorney legal support staff. That's the chart on the far right. That's really part of this first measure. A couple of years ago, the commissioners expressed some interest in knowing the non-attorney legal support staff. In my office, we have about 7.5 FTEs, full-time equivalent employees that we consider to be non-attorney legal staff. About 2.5 other staff members are not legal specific work. And so we have a 10 total support staff, about 7.5 of which I consider to be legal support. So you'll see our ratios there on the right side. Again, we're most comparable to Weld County. The number's not on that chart, but they have 6 non-attorney legal support staff. Boulder has 10, we have 7, and Arapahoe is down 1 this year. They have 24 instead of 25. Moving on to our second measure, unless you have questions you want to ask after each or at the end.
I don't see any questions right now, so we'll keep going. Thank you.
So the second measure is the chart in the middle, and this also is an efficiency measure, and it looks at the ratio of attorneys that we have in Larimer County based on the number of employees we have in county government. That really is what drives the work that we do. It's the county staff. In Larimer, we have one attorney for approximately every 222 county employees. Weld is one for every 191. Boulder is one for every 98. And Arapahoe is one for every 105 employees. So much like the first measure, you'll see a change that we had and our counterparts did as well in 2022. Since last year, we've stayed pretty stable. The employee counts have changed a little bit over the last couple of years. Our office staff has not, so this is really more of a reflection of some changes in the total county employee count.
And Bill, as I recall, I think you do a lot more work in-house where some of these with a lower ratio use more contract attorneys for specialized work. Is that right?
That is a factor. It really varies depending on the county, so you have a bit of a mix. So for example, our office uses outside attorneys for civil rights litigation. We use it for certain specialized matters like water law, environmental compliance, and things of that nature. Weld is another example. They use outside counsel for those items. They also use outside counsel to handle the appeals for their child protection cases. We handle those internally, but that's something Weld County uses outside counsel for. They use outside counsel for child support. That's something we handle in-house. And then adult protection cases, they use outside counsel for that in Weld County. We keep that in-house. Boulder, it has significantly more attorneys, and the reason for that is they do more stuff internally. So they have 24 attorneys, we have 9. And a large part of that is they handle a lot of stuff in-house. Even new things, they might farm it out initially, but then they'll get an attorney internally that has expertise in union law, for example. Arapahoe County is similar to us. They just have a much larger population, so they have more attorneys, but they also have a similar mixture of in-house versus outside counsel.
Questions for Bill? Commissioner Shattuck, McNally?
And forgive me if this is similar to Lorenda's question. Per employees or per resident, but also my assumption is with Aurora expanding 5 counties, that gets a little complex, having different, one municipality being in several different counties, and then is the amount of cases more in Arapahoe County as well? I mean, because also I'm thinking about these different jurisdictions are way different in location or size. Boulder's, I think, smaller than us now. So does this also, do they ever share how many cases they're actually working on? Is that also something that would, when you talk about the caseload, I'm just wondering about the volume and I'm thinking of a metro, more of a larger metro area might have more human services cases that would, really look to have that many attorneys, but I'm just guessing. I don't know about that. I'm just curious about that.
We don't have their case count numbers. I don't know if they have to report that to the state, at least for human services work. Do you know, David?
Good morning. David Awer, Deputy County Attorney. For child protection cases, the state will have those numbers and the number that are filed. We typically don't share the number of cases. The reason that we use these metrics, residents per attorney, is that tends to be a good ratio for the number of cases. The more population you have, the more cases it tends to generate. So that's why we use that one, because it gives you a good feeling of the more population, the more cases, since we can't pull up specific case numbers.
Thank you, David. That actually makes sense, and I appreciate you clarifying that and why this is the metric you use. That's helpful. Thank you.
And I think the ratio has changed too based on the priorities of a county. So for example, if you have a very active county like Boulder County that is involved in a lot of various issues that other counties may not be involved in, that takes more staff, it takes more attorneys. So there is a factor in the level of involvement that a county might have. And then obviously with Arapahoe County, that's only looking at the unincorporated area, but it's going to look more municipal-like, even though it's technically unincorporated. So that is reflected in a much higher population.
Okay.
So really quickly in conclusion, oh, sorry.
Looks like Commissioner Cafalos has a question. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, everyone. Comparatively, with the understanding of some of the nuances that you just described, Larimer County tends to be lean in terms of our county attorneys. Wondering how does that work with workload and capacity issues? Is everyone happy over there?
As far as I know, yes. I will say, in one of my closing comments addresses that as well. I feel like right now we are, and we have been for a while, pretty unique. We have a very long tenured staff. We have attorneys. Both David and I have been in the office well over 20 years. We have other attorneys that are approaching 20 years. We have a 15-year attorney. So it's really uncommon actually to have an attorney in my office that's not been there for 10 years or more. That's the rule rather than the exception. So that experience, I believe, makes us more efficient. The more you have experience in a particular area of work, and the more experience you have working with a particular organization, the more efficient you can be. We also rely heavily on county staff. As you all know, we have a tremendous county staff that knows what it's doing, and that makes our job easier. So it's a combination of those things. I think the longevity is a big key to our ability to stay lean and still be productive. Still be effective.
Thank you. Bill, just one thing. Can you remind me what percentage of your staff deals primarily with human services kind of cases?
Sure. We're about 50-50 right now. Our most recent hire new attorney, we started them, it was a 50-50 position, so it was 4.5 and 4.5. And we started her more in the DHS work because we needed her to get up to speed more quickly in that area. So it was it was probably an 80% of her work was DHS. We're dialing that back to hopefully reach about a 50-50, DHS to non-DHS work. Our legal support staff is skewed much more towards DHS. We have 2.5 of our 7.5 are general non-DHS, and I think we have about 5 that would be exclusively DHS. That's another factor as well. We carry a lot of burden with our paralegal staff, which allows us to have a lower number of attorney staff in that type of work.
Great, thank you. Anything else?
Okay,
All right.
Right.
Thank you.
thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, we'll move over to finance.
Oh,
Madam Chair.
go ahead.
Thanks. I'm just thinking about this, because I had a flashback, maybe not a fun flashback, but we had 4 1041s this year. And I'm not sure if any other county had anything like that. So we have some different regulations, or I call them protections. And by the way, I'll share again, I know ours are being held as an exemplar and being copied at other counties, so just wanted to share that again. That also has a specialty and takes a lot of staff time, so especially this year, having 4 of those, we don't anticipate we'll have more of that coming, but you never know. So I'm curious also, that side of it, even though you said 50-50 with the human services, are we seeing more of a need for more land use or other different sides of it other than the human services side, since we did have this kind of extraordinary year?
Not really. I think we're built to account for some ebb and flow, and we really watch for patterns. So as long as the 4 1041s in a year does not become a pattern, we're built to flex with that. But we do monitor for patterns. In the human services work, actually, there's a pretty consistent upward pressure on demand for that work. The courts are more involved. DHS is more engaged with additional steps throughout with those families. And so there's a pretty constant upward pressure on the DHS work. The general work, we're able to go with the ebb and flow a little bit more. So I think we're pretty steady on that.
Thank you. I appreciate that answer. I'm just curious about that, and I appreciate your flexibility and ability to pivot. You guys have really been subject matter experts there, and I appreciate that. Thank you, Madam Chair, for letting me ask that other question.
Thank you. We'll move on to finance because Lori has another obligation too. You don't? Oh, just the attorney's office? Okay. Well, we need to keep moving, so.
Hi, I'm Lori Lopez. I'm the finance director for the county. And I'm going to go over 3 of the graphs, and then I'm going to turn it over to our risk manager, Jeff Green, to speak about risk management. I'm going to start with the top left there, regarding the audit, the favorable audit opinion. And it looks easy on its surface because we're just checking a box, but there's a lot of work that goes into getting that clean audit. Also, if we don't get to check that box, there's a lot of consequences that we would rather not deal with if we didn't get to do that. Including if we have a really bad situation, the state can and will withhold property tax revenue. So we don't want to get there. So that's a really important measure. And I just wanted to point out that it looks easy, but it's really, there's a lot of folks that do a lot of work for that. So I'm going to just go straight down there, and we're going to look at the number of quotes, bids and quotes, and the number of RFPs. And you'll see that in 2024, those numbers have decreased, and that's a direct result of the quote quester that's been built so that departments can do their own requests for quotes. And that has really helped the purchasing department with their workload. It's also really helped departments. I had an opportunity to use it as well, and it was really helpful. And IT, we had IT built that for us in-house, and it's very, very effective. So that's why you'll see fewer bids and quotes. And then I am going to go over to the other purchasing one. So we have savings through purchasing office conducted quotes and bids. So this is just for the quotes and bids that run through our purchasing department. And the difference there is the difference between what the project was awarded versus the highest bid or quote. So we're doing a competitive process and making sure that we're getting the biggest bang for our buck there.
Thank you, Lori. Any questions for Lori? Commissioner?
Okay.
I'll just, so with a competitive process, you're obviously, in purchasing, cost is one thing, but, the quality and what we need is other. How do we make sure that that's happening as well? That we're getting both the cost and the kind of quality of work or materials that we want?
Absolutely. So when we're, our bids are actually focused on, so we have a very set, determined work product that we want. Engineering uses a lot of bids. It's very determined. We know exactly what we need, and we do a bid process for that. But we also have a selection committee that gets to look at those bids that are submitted. And our subject matter experts, they're able to determine, and they know this industry, and so they're selecting not only based on price, but on quality as well. Typically, a bid is the lowest price, but not always. So there is a process to choose the next lowest one. For RFPs, and price is not the determining factor in that one. We want someone with that expertise. And a good example of that is we go out for proposal for audit services. We don't want the lowest bid for audit services. We want someone who's well-versed in the government arena on auditing.
Thank you. That's a great example of, how we do that. I mean, saving money is important, but not the only goal here.
Absolutely not. We want the best quality.
Great. Any other questions? Commissioner Cavallis.
Yes, thank you. Thanks, Lori. The question comes to mind, and that is, do we still use, as one of our criteria, I think in particular with RFPs, I forget the exact term, but life cycle analysis, wasn't there where we would determine the longevity of something that we were purchasing?
I don't know the answer to that. I can get it for you.
Well, I thought, Well, just curious about that, I suppose.
Well, let me go back and talk with our purchasing manager.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Madam Chair.
We're sorry.
Okay, no, that's fine. We can wait on that data, that's not crucial. Any other questions for Lori before we let her go? Well, Lori, thank you, and I do appreciate your talking about the audit and the work that goes into it. I can't even imagine, but really grateful for those clean audits every single year, and thank all the people that are involved with making that happen.
I shall, thank you. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to Jeff Green, and then I'm going to go hop on my other meeting. I apologize.
Of course,
Thank
no
you.
need to apologize. Thank you, Lori. Jeff?
All right, good morning, Commissioners. Jeff Green, Risk Manager for Larimer County. What you are looking at on that chart on the top right of the screen, excuse me, I must be dyslexic this morning, is the goal. It is based on our NCCI, the National Council on Compensation Insurance, on our experience modification rating. And that rating measures the county's workers' compensation performance against all other like entities nationwide. So our goal is to be 20% better than our like agencies. And for 2024, we were actually 39% better than our like agencies. This goal can be somewhat volatile depending on the mix of types of injuries and losses we have. One significant loss can really skew those numbers, as you see down in 2020. You know, the large losses can really make a difference. But this really, it tells a story, but what I think almost tells a better story is rating us against us, which is not depicted up here. If you looking back in time, in 2024, we had fewer workers' compensation injuries and spent less money than we did in 2011. That gives you a good basis of comparison. And over that time frame, the county's employee population has increased almost by 28%, and the medical cost increases for the Colorado workers' compensation medical fee schedule has risen nearly 32% over that same time frame. So it really makes that measure even more reflective when we look at how we're performing against us versus the rest of the country. So I can answer any questions.
Any questions? Commissioner Shattuck McNally.
Can you repeat that one more time? I wanted to take some notes because
Oh.
I think you mentioned that once before and I was in passing and I couldn't catch it because I think it was on I think when we recognized you, so.
Okay, sure. Yeah, when we rate our performance against our own historic performance, in 2024, we spent less money in workers' compensation costs than we did in 2011. And over that 15-year time frame, our number of employees have increased nearly 28%. And the medical fee schedule cost increases, that's what determines the work comp medical fees, has risen just shy of 32% over that same time frame. And so when you look at those measures, it tells a much bigger picture of our performance on workers' comp within the county.
Yeah.
And just how well the divisions and operating departments are managing their risk, because it's those groups that are doing it. We just report the news. They're the ones making the news.
Well, thank you, Jeff, and I appreciate you. I think it was the 32% I had missed, and I really appreciate you recognizing that it's the operating and managing folks, but also it's your leadership and making sure they understand the benefits and how important this is, and outstanding, impressive results from everyone. I think I don't know of too many other organizations that can even kind of share that kind of outcome, so very impressed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions? Go ahead, Commissioner.
I don't have any questions. I just also thank you. I think this is excellent in terms of addressing, more employees, costs going up, and yet comparably, we are doing a much better job as far as money paid out for workers' comp claims. Thank you, sir.
Jeff, can you just talk just briefly about, what some of the departments are doing to make those numbers go down? So like health and wellness, I'm assuming some of the programs we have in health and wellness help.
Yes.
What are some other maybe just examples of how that's being?
Well, we work very closely with a lot of the CPERS groups, particularly natural resources. We coordinate with them. They've got a safety team out there, and we coordinate safety meetings. We bring in outside providers, experts to come in and talk to them on various topics, body mechanics, defensive driving techniques. We gauge them and determine our programs based on what their loss history is. If we're seeing any trends, we kind of tailor that training, and we catch them for a couple of days right at the beginning of the season when their seasonals come on board. We work with them. We work with the Youth Corps on the economic and workforce development. We do a presentation with them, and we focus with those folks on driving and just safe lifting practices, some very basic stuff for when they're working out in the field. We typically also work with the assessor's office. We've worked with Road and Bridge, to a certain extent, they do a lot of their own training. They have their tailgate talks, the same thing with solid waste as well. So we work with most all of the operating groups that are doing the real physical tasks around the county.
If you've ever been to a road and bridge meeting early in the morning, you're going to get a stretch break like everybody else in
Right.
the room. That's what they do. It's part of their culture. And Jeff is pretty humble about this, but that hasn't always been their culture. Back injuries, lifting, those kind of things were a serious concern whenever he first started.
Yeah,
And their culture is very different today.
Yeah, we brought in a program called Rock Solid at Work. It was a combination of Risk and Road and Bridge. We kind of championed it and piloted it with them, and we've seen some really good results from it. It's stretching, it's lifestyle. It's just, training yourself as an industrial athlete, basically. And do
Yeah,
a
that's
physical
true.
job.
That physical jobs
Yes.
require a great deal of athleticism in
Yes,
addition to.
absolutely they do.
I think the other thing that makes this program successful, we're looking at a chart with dollars, so savings. How much didn't we have to spend? How much better were we than the national comparison? But one of the things that Jeff impresses on the leaders throughout the county is it's not just a cost in terms of dollars. That employee who gets injured carries that injury with them when they leave us, and we may be long done paying any sort of claim, but they are affected by that for the rest of their lives. And explaining that it's a two-sided concern, there's a human concern, and then there's the dollars and cents, I think has connected the dots, which is why I believe our program is as successful as it is. It's not perfect, but it's very strong.
Yeah, thank you. It's good to hear the stories behind the numbers sometimes. Go ahead, Commissioner.
Yes, thank you. So, and I presume that with regard to the types of training and the proactiveness, that you're able to look at trends, and if there are certain departments where there's more stuff happening, then that warrants more intervention or
Absolutely it does, yes.
And yes, and I also want to say, and I think I've said this to you before, Jeff, that I do my part because when I walk up and down the stairs, I am not looking at my cell phone.
We appreciate that, Commissioner.
Yes, I'm sure you do, sir.
All right, wonderful. Anything else? Well, thank you very much, Jeff.
Thank you.
Appreciate your work.
Sorry.
Okay, next is facilities.
Good morning, Commissioners. Ken Cooper, Facilities Director. You flip the slide. There we go. Oh, very good. Yeah, we'll start in the upper left corner. That's specific to operating costs. Our goal is to avoid anything higher than a 5% year over year. And that's been challenging, of course, with all the things that we've been dealing with sort of corporately and globally. But we met our goal again this year. So that represents a lot of money, and we're grateful that the county continues to do an excellent job of reinvesting in its buildings, best I've seen in my years in this business. So really appreciate the ability to continue to reinvest. We get a lot of neat comments from visitors of our buildings that help reflect that. Many show, I think just recently at Behavioral Health, I think you folks all saw that as well. Some of the comments that we got. That's a newer building, of course, but gets a lot of abuse, and we try real hard to stay ahead of that. So the lower left talks about the percentage of preventive maintenance that's completed to the manufacturer's specifics and specifications, and our goal there is 90% that we would meet those on a timely manner, and we again achieved that in 2024. Next one over, maintenance FTEs. This one is always a bit misleading, so I'll just spend a little bit of time explaining it. We basically spend more outside contracting than a lot of organizations do for things like plumbing and electrical and things like that. We try to stay more lean on our staff side of it, and rely on outside vendors to tackle those things, with our folks sort of playing project manager in a lot of roles. So that keeps us well beneath that, that goal, the average being, about 3 times higher than what we maintain. But I think it's a good model, and we continue to follow that model. Next category is one that I follow real closely. That's our roughly annual survey that we do of our customers here in the county. Our goal is that we get, you might recall, because I think you all return those as well, but we have 10 categories in there, and one of them is overall, how do you feel about the service we provide, right? And our goal is that 90% of our customers would say good or excellent. We force them to say 1, 2, 3, or 4. We don't have a 3 in there in the middle of 5. So you push the customers toward having to say you're either better than average or worse than average. There's no middle. I think that's important. And in 2024, our goal is 90%, and 96% gave us that score. And including in that, our numbers continue to go up on the excellent category. At one time, we were hovering around 50, and this past survey, 74% of our customers said that you give excellent overall service. So very pleased with that. Housekeeping has been a big piece of that as a specific category. That one at one time hovered down in the 40s, of getting good or excellent, and we're up about double that now. And I think that's had probably as much to do with the overall scores being higher, and especially on the excellent side, because when somebody comes in the building, every morning, are things spruced up? What does it look like? What does it feel like? And I think that's a real important piece. Bathrooms, things like that, all weigh into how somebody feels about, scoring our group, over a 10-minute survey on an annual basis. So. And then these last two, we're moved toward something that helps track the energy management piece of our business. And you'll recall that the city of Fort Collins had a program, climate-wise, that the county was a key piece of for about 12 years. And since its inception, we had been in the platinum, which is the best scoring of that program. When they went away from that and adopted instead the Green Business, sorry, I wrote it down here, Green Business Network for Colorado. It's a little bit misleading because we score in a silver, but that's actually pretty solid, very solid, because there's over 600 that participate now in that program, 660, I think. Of that, about 150 are at the more involved level of involvement that the county participates in. And of those, again, starting in the 660 range, only 35 were awarded gold and only 66 silver. So we're operating at a very high level at this one too, even though it looks like we dropped a category going from platinum to silver. So we're pleased with that. That category, that program, Colorado Green Business Network, is a dual partnership with Heidi Pruis and her team as well, because it's a much broader set of categories than what the Climate-Wise program was. That one, the Climate-Wise, was more specific to energy performance and efficiency by building. This one includes a lot of things that are more community-driven, but obviously our buildings and the efficiency of those buildings plays a key piece of that as well. So, and then finally, this one needs to be qualified as well. We have 20 buildings that we track on this, and a few of them are just a little bit below 50,000 square feet. Loveland, for instance, the Loveland office down there is 46.5, close enough. So we've got a few that are pulled into that as a goal, but they're close enough to 50 where we feel like it's important to track them. 50,000 square feet, that is. And our goal long-term is to get to 80%. But for this year, again, these goals are wrapped into the state's expectations, and they don't start until 2026, and they extend all the way to 2029. So we're already operating at better than 50% of what the state expects by 2029. So that's impressive. And it's very tricky because sometimes, for instance, this building was in a good side of that measure, barely. You know, the state has a lot of juggling to do with how they rate buildings. This one, the EUI, the energy, what do they call it again? Use intensity. The EUI, this building is like 59.2 as a score, and we were operating at the roughly 58 range. But as soon as we put in our EV charging station, the level 3, it pushed that way up. And so we're actually going to put in a new measurable here in the next month, I think it is, called E-Gauge, and that'll help us separate that back out and be able to report that effectively and carve that back out. Because obviously the state wants those to be implemented, but they're pushing, you know, the scoring on the overall building performance by sometimes a few percentage points, and so it makes that a challenge. But that's an example. The blue spruce buildings, we actually don't have those on the good side of that 50% anymore. We did, but it was a little misleading because the buildings are not sub-metered over there, so we operate off of 1 meter. So we were originally pushing all the electrical use onto one building and pulling it away from the other. So one looked great, the other one didn't look as good. When we balanced that out and did it by a pro rata, you know, for percentage of square footage, now they're just both barely a little, or both a little bit below where we need to be on on that scoring. So those are examples of things that we're tracking and trying real hard to you know, to still get on the good side of it. It makes it challenging because we are so close, you know, in so many. But overall, we feel very good about it. There's the new Loveland building as another example. That one was hovering up. That again is the 59.2 score that's required for office space, for just white space for buildings. That thing was up over 80 when we first opened it, which seemed crazy because it's a brand new building. It ought to be operating at the higher level of efficiency, not the lower. But we had just a few set points and a few things that were going on with the mechanical system. With our energy management consultant, we were able to identify that, find a few things, and now that's down in I think the mid 50s. So we're back on the good side of that one. So those are a few examples. I'm not trying to drag it out, but hopefully that's helpful just as a nod to what's happening there. And if you have any questions about any of these, we hopped through a lot of them quickly. So
Great, thank you, Ken. Questions? Commissioner Shattuck, McMillan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ken, as always, so impressed with your leadership and your work here and what a great team you have. I have a couple, one comment, then a couple of questions. Yeah, I really appreciated that letter, even though it was a newer building and they were talking about, you know, thanking the janitorial staff and the staff that keep the facilities and outside up really in stellar condition. I think it's so important, especially for a building like that, for folks coming in crisis to have something, you know, looking fantastic and in good shape and not things kind of looking in disrepair. Really helps people feel safe and like it's a good place to be. And I think that's all of our buildings, right? Having people who come in like, wow, this building, even this building never looks its age. I mean, I hope I age as well as this building does. It's amazing. And I think that when I go to other places, and counties, and not trying to disparage them at all of it, just they don't maybe have the same kind of investment and program. And you walk in the bathroom and it's just little things like that really impact someone's perception or how they feel how things are. And so I just want to say, you know, you don't realize what you have until you go and visit other things, and then you're like, wow. I mean, I knew we were doing really great, but when you go and see other things, it really makes an impression. So, and I think it made, like I said, I think that impact on that family that was in crisis was monumental. Even those little things like that made a difference. And so I wanted to, would you just thank everyone for that?
Thank you.
And then the comment about the outside contracts on the FTEs per 100 square feet. When you talk about outside contracts and having that contracted out, I'm not sure what that amount of money is and what that looks like, but are we looking at contracting with local businesses and local vendors, or what does that look like?
yeah, thank you. That's a great question. In almost all those cases, they are local for sure. You got electricians, plumbers, cabling groups, folks like that are, ESI does all of our, life safety, fire inspection, things like that. So those are all folks that are, that are nearby and all, done through a normal procurement process, right? And so we've got in some cases 1 year, in some case, 1 year with 4 1 year, renewals that happen. But in all those cases, those are all nearby vendors that we, work with or have worked with, so.
That's wonderful to hear. I figured that was the case, but I thought I'd call it out because I think we all know how that really helps locally, the economy and the ripples effect with that. My last question, Madam Chair, when you talked about the intervention, especially, I was surprised when you talked about the Loveland Building when it's brand new and it was up in the 80s. I just found that really striking. And then talking about Blue Spruce. If we're operating well here in the other buildings, but are we going to have to look at interventions or financial investments in the future to get those numbers down into the level that they're supposed to be? Do we
Yeah.
need to start thinking about that, planning for that? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, in many cases, the mechanical systems are what drive it, right? And so if it's tweaking that or if it's making reinvestment, in some cases, our buildings, the mechanical systems are expected to go 20 years and we're at year 12. So some of that's tracking, sort of in a natural position to be able to re-up and make improvements as we go. We're not at a point right now, because we do have several years before we would even get to 2029, but we're not at a point right now where we would have to hurry that. We've got opportunities to pick them off as they go, with our normal component replacement plan. And so there's not anything that stands out. We are going through making some changes to the jail that are unrelated really to mechanical performance as much as they are. It's a new mandate for temperature allowance. So those are things that we'll sometimes have to kind of speed up and try to figure out. And in some cases, it's a heavy investment. But again, I've talked about it many times, but the component replacement plan that the county allows for, which pushes about 2.8 million annually, on a graduated scale, huge advantage for the Larimer County to continue to provide that. And it allows for the reinvestment that you're talking about, Commissioner. And so we have the ability to juggle dollars, obviously, within those years. Some years we'll have, a much heavier dose of things that are coming to their sort of life cycle end, and some years we've got a few years we can play with. And we don't stick very specifically to it. If it's a 20-year window, and that's looking like it's going to go to 22 years instead, we'll push that back out and find other, opportunities to spend. So very much of a juggling act, but having the dollars there dedicated is a really big advantage.
Thank you so much, Ken, and just tremendous, outstanding work from you and your team. Just so impressed, always, every year since I came on. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Commissioner Gonzalez.
Thank you. Yep, great work. 2 questions. First one is regarding customer feedback. Have we received any feedback on the new signage?
Yeah, we did. We were sending updates on that through the process. County was mostly, and we got a lot of neat comments from folks that that have appreciated that. Yes. Yeah.
Well, that's good.
It's quite a bit cheaper, long term. It was a one-time, reinvestment, but it allows for more flexibility and not spending as much per sign change as we go. When somebody leaves or there's a change in a title or something like that.
Has anyone commented on the Braille?
Sorry?
The Braille that's on this, isn't there Braille that is on the, has anyone commented that that's been helpful?
No, I don't recall that being commented on. It could have been.
Then, if I may, my final question is, I've always wondered regarding best practices or direction that we give to our janitorial services folks when they replace the plastic bags in the receptacles. If there's nothing in the bag, they don't automatically change those plastic bags. Does there need to be a certain volume of material in the bags or what?
No, if there's trash in them, they'll
take them
replace
out.
them. Yeah, if it looks like they're unused, then they'll make that judgment call and not replace them. So.
That's
Yeah.
perhaps a silly question, but
Yeah, no, it's a good question. It gets tricky. You leave food in there or something like that,
Well,
and
of
it
course.
looks like it's only this tall, but it smells poorly the next day, things like that. So it's a it's a judgment call by each of those people as they
I tend
empty the
to
trash. Yeah.
not use my own, I don't have much that I throw away. And so I'll go out to the break area
Yeah.
and make sure we fill that one up so they can
Right.
focus on
Yeah,
that one.
that's the way to do it.
Anyway,
Yeah.
enough said.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your challenges in that space. The only question that I have is, with that energy use intensity goal that's set by this, for those state standards, is there any penalty if we were somehow not to be able to reach those goals?
We're exempted from any kind of fine, and so we're doing this and tracking this sort of, because we want to and because we think it's the right thing to do. There's not a fear of, of getting fined for it. We're in much better shape. We meet quarterly with lots of different public organizations, and we're in a good position that way when it comes to how many buildings we already have that are tracking this thing favorably. And again, most of the buildings that aren't quite to that number are close. And so we feel like, with the normal investment plan that the county has in place, that we'll, our goal by 2029 is 80%. We feel good about the fact that we'll get to that, so.
That's great. Thank you for explaining that. And no, I totally agree that should be doing that because it's the right thing to do.
Sure.
But if Blue Spruce at some point became so challenging that we might need a couple more years to get to that space, I just wondered if there was any
Right.
kind of
Yeah.
penalty on that.
Yeah, specific to those buildings, they're both under 50,000 square feet, so we wouldn't be fined even if we were, sort of, grandfathered out or whatever that would be called. But if we got pulled into that somehow,
Oh, right.
unlikely, but if we did, we wouldn't, they wouldn't track those. They are talking still of going from 50,000 square feet down to 10,000 square feet. So that's part of why we include a bigger number, because we're tracking, favorably on those as well. So on our bigger buildings that aren't 50,000.
Oh, right. Yeah, I think I had heard at one point that they were going to dip lower than 50,000 square
Yep.
feet, so
Yep.
probably good to just keep in mind.
Right.
Thank you. Well, thanks, Ken. A lot of square feet that you manage, a lot of properties that you manage. I think that everybody is really pleased with, the state of the buildings. I don't think people could guess the age of the buildings because they are maintained so well. And so I know that's challenging, and so thank you to you and your team for keeping an eye on that. And also, in addition to just keeping them nice and working, really, also working on the sustainability piece, and that's really important as well.
Right.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you all.
All right, we're moving on to fleet.
Hello, I'm Heidi Vilhauer, Director of Fleet Services. So to start with, we've been in our shop for almost a year, and it's been amazing. We've seen just huge efficiencies, really as it relates to the equipment. We have the right lifts, we have space for techs to, get their equipment up in the air. We're able to lift actual bodies off the truck so we can really get in and get things fixed, and that just creates a lot of efficiencies with timing. Kind of like vacuuming your house with all the furniture out. So it's really been great. The techs are super happy. We're keeping it clean, having standard times where we keep that space clean. And so, yeah, that's been great. So the first metric is just utilization. And we have over from 2023 to 2024 in the hour utilization, there was a spike. When I kind of look into it, it's really not related to anything specific. We are very consistent with how we do business, other than some growth. Is where we see growth on the equipment side is on the landfill and the ranch specifically. They've had some increase in their hour utilization of equipment. But typically, like road and bridge is pretty flat with hours. So, and then on to mileage, there has been some increases specific departments. Surprisingly, the sheriff's department, who's a large contributor to the miles, they also stay fairly flat. But where we've seen a lot of growth is with DNR, human services, and even facilities, as a percentage of miles driven year over year. So we are putting some miles on the road, so trying to keep the accidents, minimal. And Jeff's doing a good job with some of that training.
Heidi, for the public's benefit, you track hours on the pieces of equipment that are operating but don't move very much?
Correct,
And
yep.
miles on the ones that travel far, right? So that's why there are two distinctive measures there.
Right, and some equipment, so like loaders, dozers, backhoes, those are all tracked by hours. And then, heavy-duty trucks, sedans, those kind of things are all mileage. Some things aren't tracked, like ATVs, we really took them off the schedule because we were trying to figure out what's the right way to, and then everybody would enter in what they thought and the meter, and it would skew off our data, so we just keep them on just a count. So that's utilization, so there definitely has been some increase, in the usage of our vehicles. When we go to vehicles and equipment per mechanic, one thing I'd like to call out, although the number is still, 112, every year we're acquiring about 20 new pieces of equipment. And so that's $1.5 million of equipment a year. So I think a good metric to look at is our fleet is worth almost $85 million. And so as we're adding it, 1.5 a year, that puts that in perspective. And then we also have the fuel sites that we manage. So we have 12 active fuel sites. And so one thing interesting with equipment, for every piece, you really have a piece that you're buying and a piece that you're selling. So as we get into the year of service, like 2024, it's kind of like you bringing in 100 units and you're pushing out 100 units. So that's also not really captured in that metric, but we are definitely having some growth. The next metric is work orders. And there has been a little decrease in that, more just because of efficiencies. Initially, you enter work orders for things like glass repair, toll bills, car washes. We're just getting more efficient and trying to not open work orders for specific things like that. But is what I found interesting is when I look at the hours that the techs spend, we are spending the majority of the hours on preventative maintenance, and that's where we want to be. That's a great thing. When we moved, that also was 1,500 hours of direct time that the techs spent, just getting things organized, purging, getting to the new shop, getting that all lined up. So again, I look forward to this year and just seeing how the efficiencies and the time that we'll gain back from that is going to pay off. I also found it interesting, like our top 3 spends are on the electric components, brakes and tires. So, and that's the hours that our techs spend. The last metric we have is on fuel consumption. So we dispense almost 800,000 gallons of fuel, and 683,000 of them are for our customers or our internal departments. So the rest of that is going to customers. We're starting to see that shrink down a little bit. We had a really good relationship with Hooters School District, and then they must have built their own fuel site, so we've lost some of that. But we're really going to start looking at, how we can perhaps get some more customers into using our fuel site, because the more fuel we can pump out, the less expensive it becomes.
And Heidi, again, when you talk about customers, those are nonprofit, other governments, other governmental entities like fire districts and those kinds of things, right?
Yep.
Not just anybody can come be a customer.
Correct, yep, there's some paperwork, and also, again, there's some security issues because it's behind our gate, so we have to see if their business lines up with ours. But we're out there trying to get some customers to come and make it work. We also did an analysis, Matthew Boehm did it, on the savings of internal fueling, and it is about 50 to 60 cents cheaper per gallon to fuel internally, just because, we're able to provide that infrastructure. And so we're going to be really campaigning to folks to utilize our internal sites when it makes sense. And then also looking at where it makes sense to have, looking at building other fuel sites perhaps down the road. So it was interesting that there's 112,000 gallons being distributed out of the landfill. And so I thought that was interesting just because they have only 30 pieces of equipment. So they're really small number count, but as far as fuel going into equipment, that's one of the largest sites. Yeah, so those are our measurements.
Thanks, Heidi. Questions? Commissioner Shattuck McNally?
Thank you. This is really interesting, Heidi, and I thank you for all the details, and especially about sharing how much the fleet is worth overall, and then how much it took, how many hours it took to really get that new shop set up. I hadn't thought about it as that large of a move, but it sounds like it was a pretty big deal, and I'm glad it's going so well. The question I had is back to the landfill, and I know, maybe you don't know this answer, and I don't, maybe someone else will answer it, but when we add the new landfill and we still have the transfer station, if they're using that much, do we anticipate, or are they talking about how much more fuel or vehicles they might need because they will be in two different sites? Has that been factored into the equations? I'm just curious.
Yeah, it has. We've actually looked at doing their trailers to do fuel, because a lot of times their equipment, can't just drive down to the site. We take the trailer out to fuel. So we'll be adding a couple of those to the fleet. And then for their over-the-road trucks that will be going back and forth between the transfer station, we're going to talk with Dwayne and look at Waverly as an option to fuel there, to keep that fuel internal.
Great. I appreciate, I hadn't expected that, so thank you. Well done. I really am thankful for the work that you all do, and it sounds like this investment is going to pay off a lot in the long run, and I'm glad it feels like this is a much safer and better place, especially if they can finally lift it up and get inside and all that. So thank you for these numbers.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Cavallis, any questions? You're okay? Well, yeah, I'll just say, Heidi, thank you for your work. That's a lot of fuel. It's always interesting to see those numbers. And maybe I'll direct this to our county manager with regard to sort of trying to, to a certain extent, we want to have customers because it makes this fuel cheaper. But at the same time, how are we sort of encouraging people maybe to do remote meetings and maybe not do all the traveling, so we can, that also lowers costs.
We do have, that is an active campaign. So Heidi's concerned about when they actually use a vehicle. A lot of these I'm sensing are maybe pool vehicles. When I see human services there, they do as many as they can, but they also have home visits and they have other reasons to have to go out. So we try to use Zoom as much as possible and get together when we can. We haven't done a real campaign about it. I'm not sure. We can ask department heads if we think that would help their staff. But a lot of them are looking at their fuel costs and at their vehicle costs and wondering, because they have skin in the game, because it is a utility, do we really need to do these meetings face-to-face? Do we really need to have this pool vehicle available for staff? Maybe we switch to something different to really pushing ahead with Zoom meetings and remote meetings. So I think it's happening naturally a lot, and we can do a better job of talking about it.
Yeah, and just with that, is the $85 million, oh, wait, is that the right number? I have a lot of notes here. Do we say we have $85 million worth of fleet?
That's correct.
Is
A
that-
replacement value.
Of replacement value,
If we were to replace it all
okay.
new today.
And is that comparable to other counties our size? Do we know at all?
Oh, I've been looking, I have looked with the city and county of Denver. A lot of others aren't structured like us, like they're not responsible for the fire or police, and so they carve that out. But yeah, I think as far as size-wise and structure, it's few and far, but there are some out there.
So, thinking about some of the spends in electrical brakes and tires, brakes and tires, but so I'm just thinking of something that I saw, which was kind of funny, which they went into a mechanic shop and say, which brand of cars pay your rent? And, right, that have maybe more electrical problems, right? Is that something when we're purchasing fleet that we are, real conscious of, maybe models that need more maintenance than others? Is that something you take into consideration a lot?
Yes, yep. We definitely have some units that are really on the list that we find, after we've procured, they're maybe not ideal for certain types of upfitting with wiring, adaptability, those kind of things. And then we try to really just stick to what we know.
Oh, they were naming out, I probably shouldn't name out people who they were, but it was very interesting to see what model, like, I was like, okay, well, I'm put that on my list of cars not to buy. But saying that they had severe electrical issues, kind of,
Yeah,
But
and
that's
some of
something
ours
that you're
comes from
conscious of.
rodents. We have so much rodent damage. They chew up wires in this area. Just, it's very common. Like, we come to work on Monday and then somebody can't start their car, it's probably a rodent damage.
Yeah, they'll eat through those wires.
They really
That's-
do.
I think everybody's maybe had some kind of touch of that happening.
Madam Chair, I think you and I both even had a touch
I
of
did
that.
have that. I did
And
have
we
that
had
with
that
my own
with the
car.
NOR air conditioning and other stuff, so.
Yeah. It's, just, kind of one of those things that just happens, I think. That's hard to prevent.
Yeah, that's true.
All right, well, thank you. I really appreciate the work you've done. A lot of great information here. So, next is Human Resources.
Great. Thank you for having us. My name is Bridget Paris. I'm the HR Director. And we have 4 measures we'll share with you. I think it's good to note these measures aren't necessarily reflective of something that HR can control, but are high impact, or I guess high influencing measures that HR is involved in. So the first one is average days from job posting when we open the job to when the offer's executed. And really, that's reflective of our team facilitating the process for departments, making sure those hiring managers are ready, able to move forward, know what it looks like to make that hire. After the posting closes, most of the work leans on the departments to schedule, get those candidates reviewed in for their interviews, and then to make the decision. And as you know, the more nimble and the quicker we are throughout that process, the less candidates will lose to other employers if they're actively looking. So we've watched that. Obviously, in 2021, it was a little higher. We were great in 2022. 2023, pushing up again on our time frame. And then in 2024, we've been able to bring that back down. Looking ahead, we are working on some additional hiring manager training to give hiring managers more resources, more tools. We are also looking bigger picture at overall recruiting services. How might we create more outreach? We get about 400,000 page hits on our HR website, and I would say at least half of that is around our careers page. So we do have pretty big outreach. We do work with big players in outreach area like LinkedIn and Indeed, but it costs money to advertise, to create that outreach that's needed to catch some of those candidates that may not be looking. So that's one of the tricks, and sometimes that extends the postings also. People who aren't looking for jobs, we need for it to come across their desk, and sometimes that takes a little longer. So back and forth on what we're looking for, but recruiting is an area that is a focus for us. We understand looking at those hard-to-reach candidates. Unemployment is relatively low. Colorado Legislative Council's report came out today for September, and I took a look. We are expecting an increase in unemployment. Just a hair here in northern Colorado, we tend to be better than overall Colorado, but 4 to 5% is pretty low in unemployment, so it makes the job market a little bit more difficult. We are working to find people rather than have them just come to us. So that's the first one. Any questions on recruitment? Great. Health insurance costs. Obviously, this is a hot topic right now. We have been, over the last at least 10 years since I've been in the director role, more with Lorinda prior, done a great job at getting as creative as we can to mitigate those increases that can be applied both to the county and to employees. Healthcare on average increases about 8% per year. Over the last 10 years, everybody can understand that we haven't felt those 8% increases. We've seen zeros, we've seen threes. I think in worst case scenario, I think at one point, I don't have it up, but maybe 8 or 10 years ago, we might have seen a 7. But we've kept those low. We did that again this next year. So we did 3% last year, 3% again, and looking to 3% in 2026. However, it's caught up to us to maintain our plans as they were. We were looking at a 14% increase. And that's not just in the employee premiums, that's in those costs that go to the departments. And in a $40+ million plan, 14% is pretty significant. So as you'll see, we've made some adjustments to work ourselves into that 3% adjustment. And we'll continue to modify and work on those benefits, but it's finally caught up to us. And rather than take on that full adjustment, we made some plan adjustments.
And Bridget, we are a self-insured agency, so we don't buy our coverage, we manage our own plan. So can you talk a little bit about like why that's important, how you can manage this?
I think that's one thing that we haven't done as great a job talking about in terms of what does it mean to be self-funded and what does that look like. So for every employee, each department pays a flat amount, and we take that dollar amount and we put it into a fund. Then from that fund, we pay all health, wellness, and medical costs for the employees. This includes your clinic, the dental, the vision. When someone is hospitalized or has a huge cancer event, a large claim, that money is then paid out of our fund where we have put all of those dollars from all of the different county departments. So understanding all of the different funding streams across the county, it's impacted by many different dollars that go into that pot. So we feel the responsibility to really watch those claims, to help employees understand that each choice that they make when taking medical care actually impacts their department's budget, the funds that are contributed. So it's a really big impact. Our goal over the years has been more carrot approach with Healthcare Blue Book, trying to get employees to understand that we don't want you to sacrifice quality, but we do want you to go look at high cost, low cost in that quality area that you need. Because every dollar you spend when you pay a provider and the plan pays the provider impacts how the department can operate. So an example I've given, if we had a $5 million increase, about that 14% to our plan, that equates, to about 50 employees across the county, especially in departments that have those smaller, less operating flexibility when we're asking for those funds to be put into the medical. So every spend as an individual employee can impact the services that the county provides to our community. So did I miss anything on that?
No, I think that's what I was hoping for, just that we don't buy our coverage from a company that tells us what our rates are going to be. We really do try to manage that over time, which is why HR has been able to add things like an employee clinic and some of the other benefits that we've enjoyed for a time. Those will be changing because the plan is changing. And so I appreciate that Bridget and Jennifer Whitener, our benefits manager, are looking at how do we add those back, what makes sense over time to be able to manage that and still maintain a reasonable cost for the department and a reasonable cost for employees, because we all pay a share of that as well, much smaller than the department, but employees do share as well.
Thank you. Question? No? Okay, we'll keep
Great.
going.
You want to do them? Yeah. Nick is here with me. Nick, make sure and introduce yourself, and
Yeah.
he'll take the last two.
Great. I'm Nick Cole. I'm the accounting manager for HR, and I get the pleasure of introducing the last two for you guys. My favorite is the employee survey for Larimer County. Is a great place to work. No significant change here. In fact, we had a 2% increase from last year. This kind of just shows that employees feel valued and they like to work here because it is a great place to work. So, and then we have overtime as a percent of total earnings. We had a slight uptick from 23. That was probably indicative of the Alexander Mountain fire that we had, and maybe a few other little smaller disasters. But overall, no big change from year over year there. So.
Great. Thanks, Nick. Any questions on any of these items? No. With a great place to work, there's more details on that survey, I'm sure, and what are we finding kind of is the reason that people, rate us well? Like, what's the main, they like to work here, it's comfortable, I don't know what the pay, is it benefits? What are people pointing to that make it a great place to work? Like, what's the biggest reason?
I think in general, when you see why employees stay and why employees leave, it's usually the people they work with and for. And so overall, having managers and supervisors that engage with our employees, who listen, who regularly, who care about them as people instead of, just as someone coming in to do work, makes the biggest difference. People want to show up and work for someone who cares about them. And so I would say that is where I see our biggest success areas are in retaining employees, right? In terms of benefits and pay, those can all be compared similarly to work. Employees can change, they can look elsewhere. But really what I think keeps people and makes us a good place to work is the people that they work for. And so just kind of throwing a shout out to our managers and supervisors. You can see areas with high scores. Typically, the comments that we're seeing are, my department, whoever that looks like, listens to me, right? They provide me opportunities, whether it's just for training or to give feedback or to interact. I would say that's what gets us that overall Larimer County is a great place to work. Second close would be people really love the work we do. It's hard to match that other places. Most of our staff are here to do this good work that we deliver to our community.
Yeah, thank you. That's a really great reminder of, I think it's why we're all here at this table, honestly, right?
Yeah.
Is this is important work, and and thank you for the piece that you do to help supervisors and managers get to that space, because I think that's not always, you're not born learning how to manage people. And so, I think that training that we do to help people understand how valuable some of this is a really big piece of that, so.
Thank
Good
you.
work.
Yep.
Thank you.
I also brought our annual report, and I'll leave that when we go. Some of that has some more information about HR's metrics. I will say my favorite measure in the whole book are the number of onesies that we send out for new babies. Each time an employee has a new baby in their family, we send out a little Larimer County onesie. That increased by about 30 last year. So I don't know what was in the water the year before, but we went from 50 to 80.
Does that need to start including grandchildren?
We should start a grandchild
Only
onesie
6.
request. I do. That would be fun.
They're a little outgrown though, but
Oh, no. We'll have to we should put a request form up for grandbaby onesies, because it really probably is my favorite thing that we do in HR.
Early recruitment.
It is. Marketing employees about how great it is. So I'll leave these for you to take a peek at and see some of the other things that are happening in HR.
Perfect, thank you. All right, anything else? All right, we'll move on then. Thank you, Bridget, and thank you, Nick. We will move on to information technology.
before we do that, I think I'll tag on to Fleet and give you some Zoom statistics because, those aren't up here, but they're kind of fun. We do get a lot of usage of our Zoom technology. In the last year, from this date back a year, we had over 80,500 Zoom meetings through our system, which is over 320 a day, I think is what that average is. So there's a lot of utilization going on there. That equated to 10 million minutes of Zoom meetings. And that doesn't, obviously, I didn't multiply it by the number of people in the meeting. There could be 2 people in a meeting or 10, but there's a lot of utilization in that system. On our Zoom room technology, which is what you find in some of the offices that have the actual equipment in the room, and those tend to be where you avoid the driving between buildings the most. We had 12,700 Zoom meetings in Zoom rooms over the last year, and that equated to over 1 million minutes. So that's 19,000 hours of Zoom meetings in a Zoom room, where normally in the past we would have driven a car. Somebody was typically going somewhere to get to those meetings, and a lot of those are now done through that measure. So anyways, I was trying to distract you from my other measures.
I think the commissioners at the table feel like 9 million of those minutes are,
Yeah, well,
we've done.
I was gonna say, I did
Well, a lot of
7
your-
hours straight on Fridays, or actually 8 hours straight on Friday, so I contributed to that
Well,
quite
thank
a
you
bit.
for pumping up
You're
my
welcome.
numbers. I appreciate that. Okay, so we will get into a couple discussions here. The first one is something we've been doing for a while. We've been trying to match our cybersecurity maturity score to industry averages. We actually have new numbers that are more from our Zscaler technologies, which is what you use to log in remotely. And so in trying to keep this consistent with what we used to be on BitSite, which gave us an industry average of whether we were kind of on average, a little above average, or exceptional, it looks like we're pretty much trending in the a little bit above average for our industry space, which means we try to really balance, I would call the use of technology, but not to make it so disruptive people hate the use of technology. And so maybe, Tom, you could talk a little bit about, we're constantly fighting this fight, right? Trying to find the right balance. And I'm not actually advocating that having the best security score is always the best for our organization. It's trying to find the right mix of technologies that meet our personality and our risk tolerance. Is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah. Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Tom Iwanski, Cybersecurity Manager. I think we've met. Yeah, there's a constant tug of war between convenience and security. And I know you all experience that in your personal lives, as we all do, with having to do 2-factor authentication to get to our bank accounts, et cetera, things like that. It is a delicate balance a lot of times, and you have to be aware of what your organization's capacity for change and for friction is. And some recent examples, we had some technology that allowed us to see who had compromised passwords, and we were able to eliminate compromised passwords essentially at Larimer County, except for a handful here and there. But being able to reach out to people and give them the tools so that they could start using longer passwords and passphrases is a perfect example of that kind of challenge, because people just go nuts with long passwords. And so we're trying to introduce passphrases and easy ways to remember those, as well as a means by which to save those complex passwords in order to improve our security. So We've been fortunate that certain things in the industry have allowed us to make those changes without a ton of friction. But sooner or later, you have to sometimes bite the bullet on some things and ask people to belly up and do what we ask them to. So it's always like I said, a balance. But in general, these metrics reflect the externally visible part of Larimer County's cybersecurity score. And the algorithms change every year, and the number of people that they're surveying for this changes every year, so that kind of reflects the up and down of it. So
I'd say some of the main things that we're focused on are constantly patching our systems to remove security vulnerabilities. That's a big part of these measures. They actually scan your external systems to make sure you're up to date on a lot of software. We have made some adjustments in our technology that manages your client-side protections. CrowdStrike was an upgrade we did a couple of years ago, and we've seen a lot of benefits of that software. It uses a lot of advanced technology to look for unusual trends instead of just matching it to a virus pattern. So viruses are constantly changing, malware is constantly changing. You have to also look at unusual traffic patterns and things that aren't typical on a computer in order to actually thwart some of the things that might be harder to detect. And that's been an excellent upgrade, so good job on that, guys. We've seen a lot of success with that tool, discovering malware primarily delivered through websites, which are really hard to track. There's constant movement there. I actually was joking earlier that our main cyber measure should probably be, have we had a major cyber incident in the last year, yes or no? And hopefully the answer was no. More and more of our peers are being impacted. At my last conference, I had one of the cities who had a major outage over the summer, really provide a lot of good lessons learned, which I'm going to meet with Tom with and really review some of our programs and what we're doing. There's always room for improvement, and there's always room for making people a little less happy with us with all the rules we make them do. So we appreciate your support in this, though. I think in general we've made good choices. The recent one that Tom alluded to was moving to long phrase passwords. The give back on that was you never have to change it unless we detect something in the dark web that impacts, that shows that it's already been discovered out in the dark web. If that happens, you get an automatic notification to your email forcing you to change your password and next login. So a lot of those kinds of technologies we've been putting into place. So I have been trying to come up with additional measures for cyber, but some of them seem, the majority of the measures I've been finding are related to funding cybersecurity programs, which the ultimate measure in cybersecurity is whether it is protecting from impacts. And so we've been doing a very good job on that. So as of right now, I think we're doing a pretty good job in funding it. In general, our cybersecurity program, like most of the things you've heard here, are a little bit leaner than most state and local governments, but we're not miles apart. An example is we're about $430 per FTE of what we spend on cyber. The industry average on state and I'll just say local government, cities and counties, is about $520. So, we're not miles apart. So thank you for your investments in cyber. If there are major areas where we see holes, we've always been willing to come and talk to you about it. We actually have one new FTE over the last 2 years that increased our spend on cyber, that moved our number up. We have one more FTE in Tom's group that's constantly tracking down alerts. Like if there's an alert, he chases it. And, some of them are a little scary. Some of the ones he actually traces and finds are legit. They're like, wow, somebody actually did click through. A most recent example of the types of things we have to watch for are hijacking of the key that's used in a dual factor login. So what the criminals do is they create websites that look just like Google login, as an example. And you're tricked into going there to log in, and then it does a dual factor request to your phone saying, was this you, yes or no? and you say yes, and in the process, it actually steals the token that's being used to get into Google, and then it basically uses that information to maintain a session to your email account. And the one that we actually got hit by, luckily the cyber perpetrator was mostly using it for relaying emails. They weren't really using it in a phish attack. But because we get alerts of those, we're now able to tighten our security a little farther and look for that type of pattern and make adjustments and constantly try to tune our processes. So I would say the one thing that we're starting to hear a little more about is the use of AI technology in order to enhance cyber campaigns. So it used to be you could detect a lot of grammatical errors in, the Koreans or the Russians' attempts to phish you. Now they're using ChatGPT and they look really good. Like the text is clean, they're well written. And the other thing that we're going to start seeing soon, and I'm already hearing a little bit about it, is the use of AI to do voice mimicking. And so an example of that's happened recently was there's real-time voice engines that can actually mimic one of the commissioners. And so you make a phone call to your finance person and say, I really need you to transfer money, and it sounds just like one of you three at the table. And you can't really detect it, and it's done in real time. They're using strong enough computer power to do that sort of thing. I would say in general, our advice right now is if something seems a little bit out of whack, like not of character of one of the people you work with, always say, I'll call you right back. And try to initiate your own conversation and just don't believe it on face value. This is going to be a new issue that we'll be talking about. We're also seeing, and I did send, I think, Lorenda and Brenda some information about a lot of open records are now being done through AI voice engines. And so putting processes in place to watch for that. I'm getting a little off topic because I love cyber. At least to discuss it and always look for an opportunity to train and keep us up to date on what's going on. So are there any other questions on that particular measure or things we're
Any
doing?
questions? Commissioner Cavallo?
I'll wait till the end of time allows. I do have a question, but I can wait.
Okay. The next measure is kind of something that we take pretty personally. It's hours of business downtime due to failures. I think this was updated because we had some staff outage. We had to complete our calculations last week, and it may not have made your packet. But we did have a considerable improvement from the year before to about 7.6 hours of downtime. Most of that was actually related to a vendor that we have that provides services to us, but we still count that as our partners. And if they go down, we go down, and we don't, we just assume we're all in this together. So we did have some disruption in our Zoom phone system due to some data center issues in 24 and 20, and in this year we haven't had those, so that's good. But we are starting to track, those relationships, and the performance of our vendors does directly relate to us. The more and more we use SaaS-delivered applications and things that come from the cloud, we'll be looking closely at those contracts to make sure they work well. The last measure is our unique visitors to Larimer.org. It's remained pretty constant, actually. We had a peak during COVID because everyone would love looking at our COVID dashboards, I think. It dropped back down a bit, and it's kind of leveled off. I think this is an area to keep looking at as we add additional opportunities for other services or data on our website. We've actually added quite a bit of new GIS technology to our public website, so we'll be curious to see if we see some adjustments or movements in these numbers. And I think the other two measures I was just going to ask you, it seems like a lot of the other folks at the table are offering up some internal performance measures around customer satisfaction or things like that. The two main measures we track within our software is time to first response on an incident or a service request. So when you put a ticket in, we actually measure based on the severity of the ticket, what you self-report, how long it takes us to make the first contact back. And then the other measure we track is the time to resolution on an incident. So if you put an incident that's a low priority, we have I think it's 2 weeks to complete that incident. And so we measure how often do we hit those metrics. And we're running in the mid 95, 96 range, hitting our service level agreements with our customers. So only 4% of the time do we not miss our first contact or our time to resolution metrics. Those seem to be the things the customers care about the most. We're also looking at new ways of measuring empathy with our customers, that we're providing good customer service, but we're still playing with those new tools and seeing if they work. But that kind of gives you a glimpse into a couple of the measures. Our staff meets every 2 weeks, and we spend an hour looking at our internal customer-facing performance measures. We look at everything from how many tickets are in the queue, if there's any aging tickets, what our customer satisfaction numbers are. And we really use those to be just-in-time response. Like I call it the canary in the coal mine. You're looking for things that are out of whack. Maybe there's a team that's a little stressed, or they're overworked with a project and there's ways others can jump in. So just, there's a lot of measures that we track in IT that aren't on this list that really drive our internal operations. So, any questions?
Great. Any questions? Commissioner?
Madam Chair, I have to run off to 11:30 meeting, but I just wanted to ask if I can, I'm very curious about some of these measures and having, 2 phones and all that stuff. So I'm just curious, maybe I can ask you offline. But I just want to say thank you all for the work that you do. It's not always seen, but so valued, and especially in this time and age. And I just wanted to tell you how much I appreciate your expertise. Thanks.
Thanks, Commissioner. Commissioner Cavallo, did you want to ask your question?
I'll
No?
hold off.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much, Mark and Tom. Appreciate the work that you do in keeping us safe, and we are not always aware of all the different things, so we appreciate all the attention to those alerts and keeping our data and everything else safe. So wonderful work. So with that, it's 11:32, and that was great information from everybody. Really appreciate the work you're doing, and we will adjourn now. Thank you.